There's something powerful about educators who turn their own classroom insights into resources that ripple out beyond their walls. Well, today's guest has done just that, translating her passion for literacy and instructional coaching into support for thousands of teachers across the country.
Intentional and purposeful focus on building a culture of collaboration is the secret for leaders striving to make a difference. In building a culture of collaboration, Kurtis and Lorna Hewson will share simple tips, ideas, and strategies to take your organization's collaborative efforts to the next level.
Welcome to another episode of Building a Culture of Collaboration. I'm Kurtis Hewson, lead learner and co-founder of Jigsaw Learning, and today I'm the solo host as Lorna, who normally joins, is working with schools. However, I'm super excited to once again connect with Chrissy Beltran, an experienced classroom teacher and literacy coach who's been creating resources for educators since 2011. After teaching third and fourth grade, Chrissy moved into a coaching role where she discovered a passion for supporting fellow educators through professional learning, resources, and ongoing mentorship. When her first daughter was born, Chrissy pivoted into consulting and launched a thriving online platform where she offers PD, coaching, and courses for teachers and coaches alike. I came to know her through her work on the popular podcast, now in its sixth season, helping to foster collaboration, insight, and continuous learning among educators across the world. Chrissy brings both practical classroom knowledge and the heart of a coach to her work, and I can't wait to explore how she's helping build strong collaborative cultures in schools and beyond. So, Chrissy, so great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. We talked on my podcast, and now I'm excited to be on yours.
So I need to, usually this would be at the end of how do people get a hold of you, and we'll get there for sure too.
Okay.
But why don't we start, in case someone's listening and going, ooh, I'm going to start the Google search. Where would people go online to find you and the podcast? Let's put that out right quick to people.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if they head to buzzingwithmissb.com, you can find everything there. And then specifically the podcast, the show notes are all there on my website as well. So if you head to buzzingwithmissb.com/podcast, you can find, links to episodes, and you can also listen anywhere. So Instructional Coaching with Miss B is on every podcast player that we could find. So you should be able to find it anywhere if you search for that.
So anyone that is watching the video episode, you're going to know what I'm talking about here. For the listeners, I'm going to have to describe it. Behind Chrissy is a number of different items related to Buzzing with Miss B. I see a beehive behind you, a bee up on the wall. I need to ask, is it one of those situations where you're out at wherever doing some shopping and see something and go, ooh, that connects to what the work that we're doing?
Actually, I think about 90% of these were gifts.
Oh, cool.
Because years ago, when I was a classroom teacher still, my students were talking about, what are you going to do next year? Because I was, I always would take like a survey at the end of the year and talk about what I might change. And they were fourth graders. And one of them said, you should do a classroom theme. And I said, oh, that's a good idea. Well, what could it be? And they said, well, why don't you make it bees because you're Miss B? And I thought that was so cute. And so I did it. And then whenever I first started creating resources online, for digital resources, I was like, I'll just call it Buzzing with Miss B. And so from there, people know I love bees. And so this is what I get for birthdays.
Nice. So if anyone is listening and has been inspired by the work of Chrissy, you know exactly what to send her as thanks.
Go.
So, Chrissy, share with us a little bit about the work you had done previously and what it looks like now for you. And then I really want to dig in because you have such a unique insight when it comes to thinking about how we create strong collaborative cultures in schools.
Thank you. Well, like I mentioned before, I started out as a classroom teacher, as I hope we all pretty much did.
Yeah.
I taught fourth grade for longer time. I taught third grade for a shorter time. I really loved fourth grade. That was my grade. And after that, I became a literacy coach, and it kind of landed in my lap. It was one of those things where, you're not really trained in anything. You just know what you know, and you build the plane while you're flying it. And so that's what I did for 5 years out of school. And then when my daughter was born, I decided to kind of capitalize on the resources that I already had been sharing and move in that direction. So I coach schools, I work with individual teachers. A lot of my work is virtual. A lot of it is online just because of childcare. I have little kids, and so that's kind of a bear to navigate. But I'm moving more into in-person stuff again now that I will have some more childcare next year. Both my kids will be in school.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so I'm excited to get back to that. I did do it for a few years there, and then COVID shut that down, and now I'm kind of rebuilding. But it's been so great to work with coaches online to provide support to them directly. I do coaching calls on occasion with individual coaches or teams of coaches. I've worked with schools in the past and supported their coaches as well as their teachers. I provide professional development to both. And I think my favorite thing is coaching coaches, is working with a
Yeah.
coach at a school, helping them develop that action plan, helping them figure out what strategies would be useful, and really refining their skills. That's what I love to do.
Awesome. So I want to go right there then. Let's pretend that I'm a coach that's come to you and said, Chrissy, I've started to work with this group of teachers in my school, and oh my goodness, they don't really know how to collaborate. And I mean, sometimes people outside education go, you don't know how to, what do you mean? You're always collaborating and working together. But I don't think sometimes people understand that how isolating and individualistic teaching can be in certain situations. And, sometimes coming together to collaborate might not be something that we've done a lot of or done well. So if I'm that coach feeling like I don't know how to get them into this because they haven't had many experiences in really robust collaboration, how would you respond? What kind of advice or even lessons learned yourself could be shared to help support me?
So many lessons learned, to tell the truth. Yeah, I think that many of us have been in that situation. I know whenever I was a new coach and I was starting to work with teams, they had mostly not worked together much before.
Yeah.
My principal, whenever I was a brand new coach, the principal I was working for, who had hired me at that school, had spent her first year there the prior year. So she'd only been there for a year. And she said, we got used to meeting together. That's what we did. We got used to coming together, building a habit, showing up, and looking at data. That's what we did last year.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a lot of action from that data, right? We would look at it, we'd talk about it. Some people were defensive about it, some were like trying to figure it out, but it was just kind of everybody still was doing their own thing.
Yeah.
So, like you said, they're meeting together, but they're not really collaborating, right? They were just getting started in this process. And that alone had been a huge step for them. And they still didn't feel great about it, but they were used to showing up, right? Which is an improvement.
Yeah.
And so whenever I started there, I remember, she said, well, what I want you to focus on is collaborative planning. You're going to take the data, make some plans, right? And that is something that some team models don't really value as much, collaborative planning. I found tremendous value in it,
Hmm.
but it took a really long time to be comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So to a coach who is getting started, I feel like some of the things that I wish I had done better, some things I did okay, and some things I wish I did better. I wish I had set better expectations in terms of what we were going to accomplish.
Yeah.
But I myself didn't know what we could realistically accomplish in that time frame. I was working with people I didn't know. I was working with people who had completely different instructional philosophies and experiences than myself. You leave your classroom and you don't know what's out there. You only know the people you've worked with. I had been like in a little cocoon, right? So
Yeah.
then suddenly I was working with all these other people who had such a different perspective on teaching. So it can be difficult to figure out, okay, what is realistic for us to accomplish? And so I think realistically, we kind of have to start small.
Yeah.
If we try to do too much, nothing gets done with any sort of success. So you want to have really clear expectations on what you're trying to accomplish and what people are going to walk away with. You want to be really clear about when the meeting starts. It sounds silly, but when it starts, what to show up with, where it's going to be. There's so much confusion over logistics sometimes, and it gets in the way of actually doing anything. It's such a basic thing. But whenever meetings change locations all the time, whenever, we are used to waiting for so-and-so because they always run a little bit late, those kinds of things get in the way of you doing anything, and they don't create the expectation that's consistent. And then from there, I think starting small and making a commitment that we're going to share resources, we're going to share ideas, and really having an idea of a structure. Whenever I first started, my structure was very loose.
Yeah.
And I realized that wasn't going to work. I thought I had like a lovely pie in the sky idea of, oh, it'll kind of work like my team meetings used to work, where everybody kind of shares a little bit about what they're doing, or everybody has some ideas, and then we can use this loose structure to plan lessons and people can pull from there. And that did not work at all. And so I realized over time, okay, we really need to build common understanding of what a solid lesson looks like. We need to build a common understanding of how to look at data, how to disaggregate it, and how to use it to plan a lesson in response to that data. We need to all understand some basic things about what goes into instruction and how we can best use resources and which ones are aligned to our standards and what standards we have. And so we really had to be very focused and purposeful to make sure that we were actually accomplishing something and not just getting lost in rambling conversations and complaints, because that's very easy to do, especially starting out.
I really, really appreciate the idea of we tried a loose structure and then realized, oh, we need to tighten this up a little bit. I don't know if you've ever heard this quote. It's from T.S. Eliot, and it goes like this: when forced to work within a strict framework, the imagination is taxed to its utmost and will produce its richest results. Given total freedom, the work is likely to sprawl. And I always like
That
that.
makes it sound like decision fatigue almost. Yeah, that's a good one. I
Yeah,
love that. That is true, because with constraints, you have to figure out solutions given parameters. It's kind of like the people at NASA. What was that movie, Apollo 13,
yeah,
where they're like, we have to figure out how to fit this into this using only this. So they had like all these really rigid parameters, and they did amazing work because they had to be so creative within those
yeah,
parameters.
absolutely. So, next question that I want to ask you here. I know that you've shared one of your team transformation stories with me that really highlights the development of shared language and roles over time. So, what do you think are some of the most important elements that you would see helping to move a team from independence to interdependence? And maybe even describing in your mind, what do you mean by or what do we mean by interdependence?
Sure. I think that, as a teacher, I had been very independent. We had very little oversight, and we planned together because we wanted to. And
Yeah.
we did. If we wanted to do the things that we talked about doing, we did. And if we didn't do it. And so moving from that to a school that was in a lot of need, and we needed to create some alignment in order to support student learning, it was a big shift for me. And I struggled because I did not want to be held accountable to the idea that so and so shared. So how can I have you be held accountable? It was like a mind game I had to play with myself to kind of
Mhm.
really understand the purpose of these things. And so I think some of the things that we did that were really helpful to move, I'm picturing one specific team that started out as a very dysfunctional team and ended as a team that was very interdependent and supportive of each other and would get together on their own because they saw value in it. Even if we didn't meet together, they'd say, well, we should get together. When are we going to do this? That really counted on each other, that divided up roles, and each person kind of used their highlights and their strengths to support the team. I mean, it was a fantastic team, to where they were like, please don't move us grade levels. We don't want to be split up. We love working with each other. We're so productive and we do so many good things. Some of the things that we did to support that, I can think of four things. One of them is that we celebrated successes from team members. So when we're looking at data, we said, who did well in this area? Because so much data talk is so focused on, we're low here, we're low here, we're low here. What are we going to do? Well, if they knew what to do, they probably would have done it already.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is say, you're high here. What did you do? And from there, they can celebrate those successes. We can say, that's an amazing job. I love this idea. Can you share the strategy? Another thing that we did is, from that same idea, we took those team members who had a strength in an area, and we wanted them to lead some things. We wanted them to model the strategy for their colleagues. We wanted them to bring student artifacts and share. We wanted to have these conversations around what they were doing, and we wanted them to directly share it. The third thing is that we held everyone accountable, and that can feel uncomfortable at first, especially because many teams are not comfortable holding each other accountable early on. And so a lot of that responsibility falls on the facilitator. And over time, things can improve if we continue to demonstrate what this looks like. But to start with, people look at you. I can remember one time, everybody showed up with what they were supposed to show up with, except for one person who said, oh, I forgot we were doing that today. And it was kind of like the I forgot, but I didn't forget. I just didn't want to do that. That was the tone. And the other team members just stared at me like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Because we brought our stuff. We all showed up here ready to do our part, and she's not ready. And we counted on her for that part. And so making sure that I said, okay, well, take a minute, run back and get your things. And then we all just waited. And did I want to spend the time doing that? No, it's not good. It doesn't feel great. But making sure that that person was still responsible for showing up and bringing something and having conversations when they were necessary is so important, because if you don't do that, no one can feel comfortable to start doing it themselves either.
And the thing that's so powerful about that, Chrissy, is we can go through that situation and then be able to come back and say, okay, our last day, and I understand everyone gets busy, but not all of us had things prepared. So I would love for us to be able to set out what do we all agree will happen if
Mhm.
anyone comes unprepared. So again, it's setting the norms or the commitments, but then let's continue to take that next step of clarity so that then in time, the next time, not everyone's staring at you. We've already
Right.
talked about that if you don't come prepared, this is how we agree. We will interact. Like that's when we start getting deeper and deeper levels of shared understanding and accountability, which is so, so important for that team.
Yes, it's not just a facilitator holding people accountable, it's holding each other accountable, because everybody is responsible for their piece. And so it's
Yeah.
really the inequity is, I mean, it happens all the time. We see it happen all the time in grade
Yeah.
level where nobody feels comfortable doing that. So if you lead the conversation around it and it's part of your norms, this is what happens when we don't do this. That way they know what to do. They can feel confident in doing that
Yeah.
and embracing it. And
Well,
then the
and
fourth thing, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but I think what you shared points to the courage when you're first facilitating or leading those to be able to take that step to be accountable and then turn it back to say, okay,
Mhm.
now how could we as a team respond to this next time? In
Yes,
a way
absolutely.
that respects and honors everyone, of course.
Yes. And having the team contribute to that does honor that, right? Because
Yeah,
even the person who
absolutely.
showed up without the stuff can say, well, this is what I think should happen next time, right? So then the fourth thing is we got people in each other's classrooms.
Yeah.
And so doing learning walks, we started out just visiting classrooms and observing the space and observing artifacts, because people were a little stressed out to have people in their room while they were teaching. It wasn't something they were comfortable with yet. So we called them ghost walkthroughs. And we said, okay, this is how we're going to start building some comfort. And we're also just going to notice, what do we see? What evidence of our collaboration do we see? Because if we have lesson plans that you guys wrote that said these were your learning targets for the week, or that said, and learning targets, I know they're controversial, right? I think they can be used well, and I think they can be used badly. And so, that's just an example. But if you have
Sure.
evidence of certain activities you're going to use or certain texts you were going to use, and then there's no evidence of those in the rooms, one, why are we spending time planning? We're not using any of this. It's a huge waste of time. And two, we agreed that we were going to use these plans. So then where is the evidence of that? And so then we
I love
started
it.
having conversations around the alignment, and they were challenging. Like you mentioned, it takes some courage, and it took me a lot of courage. And I also had some support from some central office personnel who were there coaching me early on in my work with teachers, which was very helpful. But if we hadn't had those conversations, they were not going to move. They were going to be stuck there. And so having those uncomfortable conversations, which I've been on the other end of, and I myself had felt like, why do I have to have the same thing as so and so? And I get it, but having those conversations was so valuable, because you have to work through the discomfort. And
Yeah.
it takes time. It takes time to get through that discomfort. And if it takes you a year, it takes you a year. You just have to keep moving. And so many times I think we give up too soon because we
Absolutely.
feel this is, ugh, it's not working, and we're so uncomfortable.
You know what? It's interesting that you use that word of uncomfortable, Chrissy, because I often share when you're really effectively collaborating, there should always, always be a small level of discomfort. The challenge that comes for us as leaders is striving for that, creating a culture that's has psychological safety so that we can be have that level of discomfort and it's not inducing a crazy amount of stress. Of course, if
Yeah.
it's a high degree of discomfort, that's not. something
Right.
that we should be striving to. But if you're really collaborating effectively, there should always be a little bit of uneasiness because I might get my ideas challenged, and that's okay. How do we
Mhm.
create that? So let's say there's a leader listening to this and is going, all right, I'm sold. I definitely feel like I'm in a building where people have been working independently, or we sometimes hear the idea of silos. We actually used to refer to it in our school as isolated islands of excellence. Great things
Yes.
happening in classrooms, but they're in isolation of one another. What advice would you give to those leaders that are now trying to move to a collaborative culture where something like coaching can have such
Mhm.
power in how we're responding for students? We'll be right back to continue this episode. We have all felt like this before when engaging in team meetings, feeling like our time is not being maximized or that this could have just been an email. As a leader, how can we ensure this is not the reality for everyone in the room? Rather than just simply coming together into a shared space, we really need to ensure that whenever we are engaging as a team in meetings, that the time is being utilized to its utmost and that we are truly seeing impact as a result of our conversations. My name is Kurtis Hewson, lead learner and co-founder of Jigsaw Learning. In this free on-demand webinar, I'm going to be sharing with you 5 planning considerations and then 5 facilitation considerations that you can put into place as a leader to take your team meetings to the next level. Access this webinar, and in addition to these 10 considerations, numerous free resources will be shared that you can begin using immediately. I can't wait to have you join me to learn how we can ensure that team meetings are having their optimal impact. And now back to our conversation.
I think part of it is you have to identify the systems and structures that you are going to focus on and build that are going to support where you want to go. And so many schools maybe focus on one-on-one coaching, but that doesn't move the school, that moves individuals. And it might move them all in different directions. And if you want to move a school together, you've got to focus and you have to be really clear about these are the systems that are important to us. This is how we're going to use them. This is the purpose, because sometimes, oh, we know we're supposed to meet weekly. And then, I mean, literally, I've sat in meetings whenever I was a teacher where my principal read us the newsletter, the school newsletter, because people weren't opening the emails. And so all that did is encourage me not to open my email because he was going to read it to me anyway. And so we want to make sure we're having a purpose, a clear purpose for everything, that purpose is communicated to teachers, that they understand what they're supposed to get out of this. And we can't falter when things get hard. Once we establish our systems, we can adjust them. Absolutely, we should. We should look and say, this is working, this is not working. What can we do to make it work? Or what can we do to make it more productive or purposeful? But we can't just go, oh, teachers are complaining about this. I guess we're just not going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens so many times. I've spoken to so many coaches who are like, well, our administrator, we used to meet weekly, but then our administrator was like getting too many complaints. So now we don't meet anymore. So I'm not sure when I'm supposed to do these things with teachers. And I'm like, I don't know either, because those structures are essential. So you have to make adjustments as needed and listen to your teachers for sure, but also understand what growing pains are. And just like my daughter the other day was lying in bed and she was like, my legs hurt. I said, you are getting so tall. You are growing so fast.
Yeah.
Just take a warm bath and go back to bed, because they're just growing pains. And that's just kind of how it is. Sometimes you just have to get through it. So the first year is building habits. It's creating a little bit more comfort with the systems. It's creating routines. And the second year can be life-changing if you push through till you get there, because school starts that second year and they know what to expect. And it's so different.
100%. Oh,
Yeah.
you're singing the same song that I love to be able to share out in schools. And I've found that exactly what you're describing being shared as in some of the change literature as implementation dips. And the understanding is if you're doing work that is meaningful and is going to change culture, it's inevitable that there'll be dips. And during the dips, we hear exactly what you say. This is hard. Why do we have to do this? I'm not sure what the purpose or what we're hoping to gain from this. And the literature says you have to work through those implementation dips. Your work as a leader is to make sure the dip is not too long or too deep,
Mhm.
but not to avoid it
Yeah.
because you have to get through it to then see your next piece of accelerated growth.
Yes. Or else I think you just have compliance. You have people showing up, checking boxes, but not really changing anything. If they're
Yeah.
really changing something, it hurts a little. It does. And then the second year, they're like, well, at least I know what's coming. I'm gonna have to show up every Tuesday during my conference period or whatever, and I'm gonna have to bring my stuff, and you can make adjustments. That's when you listen. Those dips, that's when you listen. You listen to teachers, you send out a survey, you get input, you do an exit ticket, say, what can we do better? And whenever they have issues that you know are being addressed, it just takes time.
Yeah,
It just takes time.
perfect.
Whenever they say, why are we doing this? If you know that that has been addressed, if you know that you have a clear purpose set for your meetings, and if you know they're walking away with something, then it just takes time to get through it.
So, Chrissy, I've been thinking about this conversation for a while now, and would love to hear your perspective from an instructional coach perspective. And I'm going off script. This wasn't in our pre-planned notes, so
Okay.
stick with me here. If you had the choice, and I'll let you manage this response however you like. If you had the choice between spending your time primarily working with individual teachers in individual classrooms to support them, or working with teams of teachers to
Oh boy.
support them, um, first, I'd love to know preference, but then how do you go about those differently, or what would be the same? Love to hear your insights on that.
That's such a good question. And it's I think so like personally, if I'm just for fun, I would like to work with a team that I've worked with for 2 years.
Yeah.
If I get to pick it, if I don't get to pick the team that I've worked with for 2 years, I want to pick an individual teacher because there are so many fewer dynamics to manage.
Yeah.
You know,
So
as
would it
far as
be fair to
easy.
say from that the effort is greater in the team, but the ceiling is also higher potentially? Would that be
Yeah,
fair?
I could see that. Yes. And if you're thinking about like moving your school, I feel like you can't do more of one or the other, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. I think
Yep.
we're really looking for as even a split as you can get, which is difficult. But I feel like schools in different places need different things. And the biggest thing that we can do to support our teachers is differentiate what they get based on their needs.
Yeah.
And so you really have to have a good handle on your people and your teachers, what they need as individuals, what they need as teams. So the way that I look at it is kind of like we look at instruction in tiers. The tier one is the PD that everybody gets.
Yep.
And we can differentiate within that PD, certainly. But we're going to choose a school focus, right? There are school initiatives. If we don't have school initiatives, where are you going? I talked to a teacher not long ago and I said, so tell me what your new principal believes in. Where are you heading as a school? And she paused and she goes, you know what? I just realized that's the problem with this year. We have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
I said, well, there you go. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense as to what you're telling me about, frustration, lack of clarity and communication. So we have to have clear focus for the whole school, and that could be something big and underlying. Academic language is a good one. Everybody needs it. Writing across the curriculum, everybody should know how to do these things. Student engagement, those big fundamental pieces everybody needs. That's your tier one. Then tier two is where you adjust for your teams. That's the way I see it. So you say, okay, this team, you can either work within that same focus, or you can do something completely different. You have to know your people. So if you say, okay, well, I'm going to differentiate even further for my teams within my school focus, great. Or if you say, you know what, my school focus is this, but what we really need to get good at is that in this grade, you can completely differentiate. And then individual coaching, some people do offer coaching cycles specifically within the umbrella of what their school is working towards. But my experience is I work on what the teacher needs me to do. That I have found to work best for me. So it's like completely differentiated and personalized to what that teacher needs. And you're differentiating your strategy that you're using with the classroom and with a teacher. You're differentiating the topic, everything is personalized to that person. So that's kind of how I envision my work with a school to make sure that we're covering all our bases and everybody's getting what they need, but it's also we're moving together somewhere.
This really reminds me of an idea I've been working through, and it comes from Michael Fullen, but working with schools where you get the pushback of, oh, do we have to collaborate?
Mhm.
Can't we work individually? And someone saying, well, we can't exist as individuals. We have to look at our collective efforts. And let's stop thinking of this as an either or conversation
Yeah.
and rather an and. We can have collaborative efforts happening and honor individual practice. And you're even sharing, how can we have coaching and support within teams and for individuals? It's not, I kind of set you up with the question of if you had to choose one or the other. And I love
Yeah.
how you went, I know I'd actually go both, which, yeah, I would agree 100%.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I feel like you can't move the whole school if you don't work with your teams. But you also can't like the things that happen in team meetings. There are many classrooms that it doesn't impact their instruction because they cannot envision it. They cannot
Mm.
see it. They need the practice. They need the one-on-one support. And every teacher needs that in some area or another. And that's where you really differentiate for individual.
So, Chrissy, I would love to pick your brain on this too, knowing that you have a podcast that impacts hundreds, if not thousands, of teachers that are engaging in that work. You've had on some really high-profile guests and people who have lots of experiences. You've been coaching and supporting educators. You've got a really great global perspective. I'd love to know from you. What do you think is the next step, or I mean, this might be the cliched phrase, but the next frontier when it comes to helping teams thrive collaboratively, knowing that the access to resources is not necessarily escalating in our schools or our
Right.
systems. How do we, how do you see the greatest impact happening in how we leverage and invest those resources to continue to grow professionally?
That's such a good question. And I feel like there's so many different directions it can go because I had thought about one idea and then as you were asking it, I thought about something else. So I'm just going to say all the things. I think one thing is that we have to spend more time with teachers watching teachers teach.
Amen.
And we lock people up in these rooms like little jail cells with a bunch of kids, and then we're like, make sure you're doing your best job, make sure you're doing all these things, but people haven't seen it. Maybe when you were a student teacher, you had a good experience.
I was just
That's
going to say the
yeah.
one person in the building that's probably been able to watch other teachers is the person with the least experience in the building.
Yes. So they don't even know what they're looking at
Yeah.
yet, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I have met only a handful of student teachers who didn't think their mentor teacher was pretty fantastic because they don't know what they're looking at. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just getting started. They're getting ideas, they're accruing information so they can decide what they want to be. But it's a very short time and you don't even know. You cannot imagine being on the other side, even if you're in charge of the class. You're not.
Yeah.
Everybody knows you're not. So it's different. So whenever teachers start teaching, we lock them in rooms. We're like, stay in there until it's PE time, and then we'll come out and talk a little bit, and then you go back. And that's what we do with so many people, and they don't see teaching, so they cannot envision what's going on outside their room. And that's why we have that culture shock whenever a coach moves from the classroom to the coaching position or from one school to another. It's like, whoa, what is going on here? I never had any idea this was happening. I thought
And
everybody did what
I'm
I
gonna
did.
I'm gonna interrupt you with that too, Chrissy,
Uh-huh.
or even the thing of a coach is coming in to watch me teach.
Hmm.
What's wrong? Am I under evaluation? Did I
Yes.
do something wrong? Like it's not natural for someone to come and watch me teach. I used to experience that even as an instructional leader of walking through classrooms when first coming into a school and a person stopping everything they're doing and saying, "Oh, kids, Mr. Hewson's here. What would you like, Mr. Hewson?" And I just wanted to come and watch you teach.
Yes. Yeah. Trying to be low key here, right? Just
Yeah.
kind of let me hide out in the for a few minutes. Yeah, I totally agree. We do not spend enough time in each other's rooms in any of the ways that we should be. And so I really think opening those doors is one of them and getting people into each other's classrooms, whether physically in the rooms or video coaching. We need to be watching videos of ourselves. We need to be watching videos of each other. We need to be sharing highlights. We need to be sharing lowlights. We need to say, this didn't go well. I'm not sure why. My kids aren't getting it. This is what I'm doing. Can you watch this video and tell me where I'm going wrong or if there's something I could do differently? We have got to be so much more honest and open about what's going on in our classrooms with each other to benefit each other and the whole. That's one piece of it. And then the other piece, I think, is even beyond the school, we should be really building bridges to other schools.
Yeah.
Why is it
100%.
that I can work 2 miles from a school and have no idea what life is like there? You know, I used to take walks with my brother a lot, and through the neighborhood, and I did not teach in the area that I live in. I taught about 20 minutes away. And I would walk by this one school that's really close to my house, and I'd always say, just wonder what goes on in there. And he was like, it's a school. What do you mean what goes on in there? And I said, it's just, they're all so different. You have no
Yeah.
idea until you do it. Like, what is it like to teach there? I don't know. You know what you know, and that you don't know what you don't know. And so I feel like if we could be like, I know teachers who have been teaching for 10 years and they've never gone to a conference, just a conference to learn from other people in person, even a virtual one. We have got to build better bridges from school to school, from district to district. Why is one district completely like, I mean, in the States here, we are like, one district is not like another at all necessarily. The schools can be 3 minutes apart, but because there's a boundary line, they function completely differently. So, you know, it's just, I feel like we spend too much time, like you mentioned, in silos, like you mentioned, individual islands of excellence. We spend too much time, everybody doing their own thing. And while I loved it for a while as a teacher, now that I can see beyond that, I realized how many opportunities were missed because I never got to see anybody else teach at
Yeah.
all.
Well, and I think it's almost like a fish doesn't recognize the water that they're swimming in,
That's
and
right.
it's that idea of if I stay in my silo, it's comfortable. But until
Mhm.
you've had the experience of being out of it and realizing, oh my goodness, there's a greater world here for me. And oh my goodness, I'm at a place I never even thought I could be through the collaborative efforts that I'm engaging in. Like, I agree. We have to give those opportunities and normalize those opportunities
Yes,
as well.
not punitive, not because you don't know what you're doing and you need to
Yeah.
go figure it out. And that's where coaches are often set up for failure as well. Oh, here's Miss So and so, and she's going to work with the teachers who are struggling and the new teachers. Well, guess who doesn't want to work with Miss So and so? Everybody.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to work with her now, you know? So we have to set up school that's places where we learn how to do stuff better.
Yeah.
And teachers are a piece of this. Teachers have to learn how to do things better too. We all do. And if we are just trying to support the ones who are new because that's who might still need a little bit of help, we're kind of missing the point in that this is a really hard, responsive profession that changes a lot. And we have to keep learning stuff in order to meet needs of kids.
Yeah. I've loved, there's a video from Dylan William where he talks about we have to stop focusing on just our bad teachers, and he's air quoting when he goes
Right.
through that, needing support and going, no, all teachers need
Absolutely.
support. And the idea is because we're always trying to improve upon our practices overall. And I'm sure you've had the situation, or I've heard from coaches who have that where a principal comes and says, I'd like you to go and start coaching with this person, and I'd
Mhm.
really like for you to look for this, 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 and this. And if you can help change this, that would help us tremendously,
Mhm.
which kind of again defeats the whole how are we learning from one another?
Yeah, and it is difficult because that is often the reality. You know, schools have so many accountability measures that were not their choice.
Yeah.
And so it's sometimes you're like, okay, we have got to, certain things have to change, right? Sometimes things are not good, like for kids. There are things that are not good for kids. And so sometimes I have been directed, you know, but I still feel like there's a way to approach that teacher and
Yeah.
say, hey, you know, Mr. or Miss So and so told me you're working on such and such. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that? And then just kind of see where they take you. And sometimes where they take you is that I mean, I thought it was fine. Or sometimes they'll tell you, well, I just don't think it works, and so I'm not doing it. And so then you know where to go. But if you go in and say, hey, we need to fix this and this, immediately you're not you're treated like, you know, an unwanted handyman. No,
Yeah.
everything's fine, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, you're like a solicitor. So it's we defeat the purpose whenever we go in telling teachers we're going to go fix them. You know, whenever I was a new coach, I was introduced as the expert. Huge mistake.
Oh,
Did not
yeah.
know it at the time, right? Because I'm sure everybody was like, oh, great, an expert finally to tell me how to do my job.
And then when they go, expert, I'm having this problem. Can you tell me what to do? And you go,
Yes, fix it.
I don't
Uh-huh.
know.
That's right. Yeah. And so it's not a great way to start. So if instead, if we establish a culture of learning across schools and say, we are here to grow and teachers are going to learn and grow. And it's hard. Not every profession is required to learn something all the darn time.
Yes.
It can be exhausting. It's mentally taxing. It takes a lot of mental energy. It absolutely does. That is the job. And so if we can create the culture that everything's not going to be perfect, when things don't go well, we're going to talk about it. Everybody here has off days or lessons, and it's not a bad thing to try something and it not go well because now if you know it didn't go well, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you can grow it, you can change it. So if we can create this culture of supporting each other and collaborating and growing, then a lot of the problems that we have will not be, we won't have them anymore. The problem is we stick people into little rooms all day by themselves and say, do your best, and I'll come check on you in a few months for your evaluation.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, Chrissy, from your perspective, your experience, and just the engagement that you do with other coaches, if
Mhm.
you have a leader listening to this who is sold on, I really need to create more opportunities for collaboration, more structures, if you could give them three pieces of advice, what would those be? Three takeaways. We'll be right back to continue this episode. Do the people in your organization function as a group or a team? We used to use these words interchangeably, but discovered there's a significant difference when we operate as a group versus when we operate as a team. So, what's the difference? Access the Are We a Group or a Team activity to engage your staff in understanding if they are functioning as a group or team, part of our Collaborative Leaders Toolkit series. In this workshop guide, you'll clearly define the impact of working as a team and the conditions necessary to establish those effective teams. This workshop guide is yours for only $9, and you'll receive everything you need to lead your staff, including workshop slides, participant handout, step-by-step instructions for leading this activity, as well as suggestions for next steps and possible extension suggestions. Go to bit.ly/J group team to access, or search for it under the resources tab on jigsawlearning.ca to learn more about this valuable resource to reinforce why we need to be working in teams to ensure success for each and every learner. And now back to our conversation.
I say the first is that you really want to practice what you preach and listen to your people. So if you're trying to build collaboration, it's about listening to each other, talking, sharing ideas, coming up with the best possible things to do or the best possible steps to take. And as a leader, if you cannot listen and have clear communication and, receive feedback, then you're not setting the model or the example for what collaboration should be at your school, and everybody knows it's all talk. So
Yeah.
it's real easy to say, we need to work together, we need to collaborate. And then when everybody goes to, send you an email, you never respond.
Yeah.
Or that's the best one that I see usually. Or whenever somebody comes in to talk to you, you say, well, that's just the way it is, instead of listening and trying to understand and making sense out of things. So that's the first one. You have to practice what you preach. You have to listen and be a true collaborator yourself. You also have to create opportunities for teachers to work together on real things.
Hmm.
So you don't have to make the opportunities. I guess you just have to find them because the opportunities are there. So, teachers, they can work on learning something new together. They can create an assessment together. They can review data. They can plan a unit. There are all of these things that teachers need to be doing to build their craft and their practice together. And, my favorite is looking at student work together, because I feel like it's such an authentic way to have conversations about what kids can do, how they can do it. I mean, there's so many directions to take it. Those are opportunities that you have. A teacher who has a complaint, a grade level who has a complaint, is an opportunity to get them to work together on something. but we have to reframe the way that we hear complaints or frustrations or challenges and
Yeah.
say, those are actually opportunities for me. I have to listen for those. I can't just be like defensive about it. I
Yeah.
have to really say, okay, I see that you're having some trouble in this area. What can we do? And that's whenever we come together as a team.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is kind of like the flip side of the last one. Avoid team meetings that are pointless, like reading the newsletter, avoid having, top down stuff that it's just like a checklist. And I get that sometimes you have to sit in a faculty meeting because everybody has to learn how to administer the state test. I totally get it's just legal. You have to do certain things, but try to minimize that stuff if you can, what you have control over. There are so many districts that have so many policies that require so much from teachers, and it takes from that limited time that you have because you have to maximize that time that people have a shared schedule or a shared common planning time. That's very limited.
Hmm.
And I mean, the schools, that's just how structures are because kids are at school all the time. And some schools have a great structure where they're like, oh, teachers come 45 minutes early on this day and the kids get to, that's lovely. A lot of places don't have that.
Yeah.
So you have to minimize the time wasted. And if you're calling people together, it has to be important because if not, then they get the idea that those meetings are a waste of time. Yeah, I remember whenever I was a teacher, my principal, used to play "We Are Family" over the loudspeaker, and that signaled the faculty meeting. And yeah, everybody trudged down the hallway, to get to the cafeteria, and that's where we had our meetings to listen to "We Are Family." And it was I don't remember ever being prepared for those meetings. I just remember showing up. I didn't even remember when they were most of the time.
Yeah.
I heard the song and I was like, oh, I guess I better run to the cafeteria now. And so it was not, I don't think I got a lot out of them. What was the purpose of a lot of those meetings? They never told me what the purpose was. And you kind of have to make it really clear. So minimize what you're doing that wastes people's time because wasting time for a teacher is like the cardinal sin. It's just, you
Yeah.
can't do it.
I can remember the flip side of that when we got to a place within our school where teams were really feeling like they were making differences, getting traction, whatnot, and someone would have their team meeting on a Tuesday and something happened on that day that
Yeah.
had that time taken away. And the next morning, first thing is, we missed our planning time yesterday. What is there a way we can get this back? And that was, yeah, that's an issue to attend to, but man, what a great problem to have that
Yes.
people are saying we need our planning time.
Absolutely. I
The-
remember that too. Towards the end of the year, when you have a bunch of different events and oh well, this grade is out on a field trip or this one has a award ceremony. And they're like, but when are we going to do this? We need to
Yeah.
figure out when we're going to do this. Can you meet with us another day? And it does make you feel like, wow, they find like you're getting the value. That's the only reason you'd be asking is because you have found value. And so you have to keep working with people until they get value out of it. And that means changing yourself and changing what you do to facilitate, changing the focus, but you got to stick with the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chrissy, this has been such a valuable conversation. I've been looking forward to it for a while. Once again, remind people if looking to connect with you or access any of the resources, the podcast, how do people go about doing that once again?
Yeah, the podcast is Instructional Coaching with Miss B, and you can listen on any podcast player. And then buzzingwithmissb.com, of course, is my website. My Instagram handle, I share a lot of stuff there for coaches. So if you want to check it out, it's at Buzzing with Miss B. So basically, if you search for Buzzing with Miss B, a lot of different stuff that I put out there is going to pop up.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to include it in the show notes as well. Chrissy, this has been fantastic and love getting to connect with you again. I look forward to future conversations. Thank you so, so much.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So I had the opportunity to be on instructional coaching with Miss B a little while ago as well. I'll make sure that that episode is linked here in the show notes. And as a result, I've been looking forward to this because even in that conversation, the passion that Chrissy brings forth and um, the real understanding that when we can work together in this profession, I love what she talked about of opening up our classrooms, opening up our schools, getting out of our silos. That came through so loud and clear and yeah, resonates for me as well. So some of the takeaways for me, she called it growing pains. Literature will often share it as implementation dips. Again, that reminder for us that it when coming together to collaborate feels like it's getting difficult, when it feels like there's complaints or, we could make such better use of this time, being able to get the feedback, to listen, to make adjustments, but not to abandon is so critically important. And I loved for her talking about, it might take that for full first year to get habits, to get processes, to get structures in place. And it might be in our second year where we see things really take off for us. So not to abandon where when we go, you know what, we've had 2 times where teachers met together, it wasn't going super well, so we've stopped doing that. No, we should be thinking about rather what adjustments could we make, what feedback are we gathering. I love what she said too of work on real things, and that we're not coming together to collaborate on things that aren't purposeful, that aren't meaningful, and more importantly aren't meaningful for the people in the room. We often share in this from a leadership perspective, yeah, set the structures and the processes, but then don't try and micromanage the work that happens within that. Let good people do work that is meaningful to them within those clear structures and processes, and aligned with the clarity of a focus area or a goal that she mentioned. If you don't have clarity on where you're going, that's probably going to impact everything within your school. And then finally, that reminder for us of, again, focus on celebrations. What are the tiny little wins that we're seeing, the things that we're collaborating on? And I loved her saying, let's look for evidence of things from our collaboration that are happening in each other's classroom. And I take that one further to say, when we have multiple teams within the school, bring to our next staff meeting or a PD day evidence of the work that you've done that's been impacting work in the classroom. Again, that continual recognition that what we're doing through our collaborative efforts is having impact for our students and for our staff. Finding evidence of that and then celebrating is so critically important. So definitely check out Buzzing with Miss B. Check out the show notes for that. And if this episode has been valuable for you, share, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We really look forward to next conversation and the next guest we have an opportunity to bring into this, talking about how we build effective cultures of collaboration. Wishing you the best, and I know Lorna would want to be able to say, see you soon.
Jigsaw Learning, founded by Kurtis and Lorna Hewson, is a team of educators who work with schools, districts, and educational leaders to establish collaborative response to ensure success for all students. Because every child deserves a team.